Shit We've Read is a proud member of Bilo Network, a network of geeky podcasts.
Please visit shitwe'veread.com to support the show.
Now let's talk about some books.
Hello and welcome back to Season 4 of Shit We've Read, a sci-fi and fantasy book podcast hosted by some geeky friends. My name is Jason Rico, one of your hosts on this episode, and that's right, this is our Season 4 premiere episode. Did you miss us? Because we missed you. At least I did. I don't want to speak for my co-hosts. Speaking of co-hosts, let me go ahead and introduce them right now. First up, we have Laura Benson. Hey, Laura.
Hello. I am very excited to be back for our next season.
I'm glad that you are back to discuss books with me. Also, we have Bella Romero. Hey, Bella.
Hey, Rico.
Welcome back.
Good to be back.
Good to have you. It is Season 4, and we're super excited to, do some new stuff. The book that we're talking about today on this episode is actually a graphic novel, Saga Volume 1, which collects the first 6 issues of the comic book series, written by Brian K. Vaughan with art by Fiona Staples. We're super excited to do something a little different for y'all, and we hope you enjoy it. Along with, trying some new book types for episodes, one of the big changes we have for this season is we have a Discord server. For those of you who may not be aware of what a Discord server is, it is a cool online community where people can gather and chat about stuff that they all share in common. You can find them for all sorts of interests. Ours, obviously, is going to be about books and the books that we talk about. So if you're interested in joining that, we'll make sure that we post a link to join in the episode description. You can also find it on our social media and on our website. We'd love to have you. We love talking with our listeners and other book readers. It'll be a good time. We've been working on it for a few months now and finally launched it for Season 4. And yeah, it'll be a fun time.
I'm excited for it because there's so many times that I want to talk about books and I just have you guys. And so I'm like, I've got this Discord now where I can talk to a bunch of people.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because we talk about books, obviously, and we talk amongst ourselves. But this allows listeners to also join in the conversation. So yeah, we'll announce, the books that we have ahead of time so people can talk to us before we even record the episodes. Once the episodes go live, if you want to respond to any of the bullshit that we've said on our episodes, you can definitely do so and respond. You can correct us when we're wrong. You can add in your own thoughts, point out something that maybe we missed. It'll be a good opportunity for us to really engage with listeners, and we're really excited about it. So hopefully, everybody listening, you'll consider joining us there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. It's been a while since we've done this, so let's see. I've announced the book, I've announced the Discord, I've announced the co-host. I think we're ready to get on to the next segment that we normally do, which is the other shit we're reading. Laura, why don't you start it off? What else are you reading right now other than the book we're about to talk about?
Me? Okay.
Yes.
So mean, Rico, picking on Laura.
I know. I'm sorry. We've done this how many times? You sound so shocked.
I don't know. Like, I guess I was just going based on the order in the outline.
Forget the outline. The outline is just a guideline,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I carve my own path.
Yeah, we're always picking on each other, Laura. That hasn't changed.
I know. I am actually literally just finishing up Evocation by S.T. Gibson or Saint Gibson. For anyone interested, it's an entrancing urban fantasy featuring a medium, a sorcerer, and an astrologer whose lives become entangled through curses, magic, and deals with the devil. So, kind of gives you like a good idea of the vibes of this book. It's an arc that we got from Angry Robot because we're very excited to be doing an interview with the author. I'm excited. I tried to finish it last night, but I was just passing out. So I will have it done today. And I'm looking forward to adding some questions to the interview.
I'm super excited that we're doing an interview with the author. We'll talk about it more later in the episode. But I read the arc a few months ago and loved it. I absolutely adored the book. And this was before we knew we were doing an interview with the author. Bella, I know you finished it. So
you were so excited when they asked about doing an interview. You were like, yes, we're doing it.
I was excited and nervous. Like, If it's an author that, I didn't really care about, is like, fine. Yeah, I could talk to you. But if it's someone I'm actually interested in talking about, it's like...
Get in your head about it.
I feel like I'm going to talk to a girl I have a crush on, Like, I could talk to a girl fine, but I have a crush on you. I don't know how to say. What do I do with my hands? Like, where do I put them? What, like... Anyway.
Well, and we've also read...
That sounds a little awkward the way now that Bella's gave me a weird face. I mean, just how does someone stand nonchalantly by crossing
I was
arms?
like, you put them where they're consensually allowed to be.
I didn't mean it like that, you weirdo. I meant on myself. How do I hold my hands on myself?
Episode. I'll pull it back. I'll pull it back. Listen,
it kind of is actually.
Bridgerton.
It kind of is going to be an After Dark episode slightly, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I just want to mention too, we have read one of her books previously for an episode. We read A Dowry of Blood.
Yep, we did previously read one of her books, A Dowry of Blood, way back in season 1, which seems like a long time ago. That one was with Emma Skies as the guest host. Mm-hmm. So definitely anybody who's into...
We've come full circle.
That's true. It was way back before you had joined us officially. So you weren't on that episode.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I know.
Well, Bella, what are you reading?
Well, like you all said, I also read Evocation. So that was really good. I'm excited to talk to Saint. Looking forward to that. I finally made it to the new Percy Jackson books. So I'm almost done with Chalice of the Gods by Rick Riordan. For those of you who haven't been following or don't know who Percy Jackson is. Having fun with it. It's definitely it's shorter than the other books and less serious than the other books, which is kind of nice. It's a breath of fresh air. So it's been easier to read. Like I was reading Saga while I was listening to the book. So it's easier to keep them separate and not get dragged into Percy Jackson time and time again. Because it wasn't like, what's going to happen next? I'm on the edge of my seat. It was just kind of like a mystery, gotta go on a quest. Kind of cozy. It was cozier.
Chill. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like a cozy Percy Jackson book, which I was not expecting at all, but was kind of happy. Given all that Percy's been through, I was like, we don't need to save the world again. There's been two series of that. I'm kind of glad it's not about that. It's a little bit more about him as a person trying to get into college. It's good. So I highly recommend for anyone who is a Percy Jackson fan or likes mythology and wants to read the books. I would certainly, I wouldn't start here. I think you have to have read the other books or at least know about the first series, but it's good. It's fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
What about you, Jason?
I recently finished The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. It's a fantasy mystery featuring a Holmes and Watson style pairing with some really fantastic world building. I feel like I love fantasy, obviously, and I really like murder mysteries. And I've been trying to find a hybrid of the two that really satisfies me. And few and far between. I feel like a lot of fantasy mystery books I've read drop the ball when it comes to one or the other. It's a good mystery, but the fantasy is barely there, or vice versa. A great fantasy book, but the mystery is unengaging and lackluster. And this one, I think, really did both well. It was a great world. I was really engrossed in the building of this world and the way the magic system worked, but also the pairing and the mystery and the detective work was also a lot of fun too. It's a really good time. This actually, I read it for the upcoming fantasy and sci-fi book club meeting at A Seat at the Table Books in Elk Grove, California. I think we mentioned them before. If you follow a co-host, Emma Sky, she mentions them all the time. They're a great local bookstore in Elk Grove, the greater Sacramento area. And they focus on marginalized voices, a lot of very, very queer friendly, POC friendly. And I've been going to these fantasy sci-fi book club meetings for over a year now, and they're always a good time. So luckily, it happened to be a book that I was already going to read that I wanted to read. That worked out really nicely for me. Sometimes we vote on books and I'm like, I don't necessarily want to read. It feels like a chore. Although more often than not, I end up loving the book anyway. So
nice.
Book clubs are a great opportunity for people to expand their horizons a little bit. I read a lot of books via that book club, my book club with my coworkers. I've read a lot of... I have so many book clubs. I'm reading nonstop, so much.
Jason doesn't do anything else.
I really don't do anything else. It's a problem.
But you do other things.
I do, I know.
Kind of the crazy thing is like, as much as we joke about your singular fixation, you also go out and do other things. You have friends, you have a partner.
Yeah.
Just how do you do it all?
I
don't think you sleep.
I don't. That's what I sacrifice. One of my coworkers actually is constantly surprised by like what a lively social life I have, I guess. Because he'll just jokingly be like, "So, what are you doing tonight?" And I will. I have a concert tonight. He's like, "Of course you do. Of course you're doing something fun tonight."
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Like all I have to do, I just see your Instagram stories, and you're always doing something. That's why it's so hard to schedule things with you.
I'm sorry.
Except that I feel like whenever we're like, "What's your availability?" It always aligns. It always works out. It's like Rico, you're that girl, and I hate you.
Thank you? Question mark?
Yeah, is that a compliment?
It's a compliment. It's a compliment.
Sorry? Question mark? I don't know how to respond to that.
You should apologize. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
It's a compliment. Okay. You make it look effortless and cool and whatever.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
So gross. Let's move on. I can't.
Okay, let's move on.
I'm borderline complimenting you, and that's too much for me. So we need to move on.
You don't want to set the precedent for the new season, you know.
No. I gotta be consistent.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on. So, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, what we're here to read is Volume 1 of Saga, which is a ongoing comic book series by writer Brian K. Vaughan and artist Fiona Staples. Falls under like epic space opera / fantasy. This volume collects issues 1 through 6, which were first published way back in 2012. Bella, I picked on Laura first, so I'm picking you first this time. Do you want to read the synopsis?
Just as I take a big sip of dairy, sure, I will read.
It's a short synopsis.
Okay. Saga is the sweeping tale of one young family fighting to find their place in the worlds. When two soldiers from opposite sides of a never-ending galactic war fall in love, they risk everything to bring a fragile new life into a dangerous old universe. Fantasy and science fiction are wed like never before in a sexy, subversive drama for adults.
Nice, thank you.
Short and sweet.
Yeah, I love that. I was like, it doesn't give too much of the plot away, but it hooks you right in. It gives you enough of like what's going to happen to see if you're interested in like a star-crossed lovers, like sci-fi battle kind of space opera, right? It's a good synopsis.
Yeah, you mentioned star-crossed lovers. One of the early solicitations for this book described it as Star Wars meets a Game of Thrones, but also evocative of epics like Lord of the Rings and Romeo and Juliet, which I definitely strong. Yeah, spot on. All of those are very spot on. As I mentioned, this is an ongoing comic book series, and Volume 1 collects the first 6 issues. I'm sure a lot of people listening are already comic book fans who know the difference between a comic book and a graphic novel. But for those of you who may not already be familiar, I'd like to do a quick breakdown between the two, and a third category, the trade paperback.
I will say this is very helpful for me, who has no idea about any of this.
There we go. All right.
So I'm like, yes, Professor Rico, continue.
Class is in session. Everybody sit down. These definitions are coming directly from the Library of Congress research guides, so if anyone disagrees, take it up with them. Comic books are serialized stories, mostly short in length, and the stories they contain can continue over months and sometimes years.
They're kind of like chapters.
Sure, yeah, exactly, like chapters. Sometimes those comic book issues are collected into a trade paperback. Trade paperbacks are a collection of stories originally published in comic books, reprinted in book format, usually presenting either a complete miniseries, a story arc from a single title, or a series of stories with an arc or common theme. And then the older sibling to all of that is a graphic novel. Graphic novels tend to be much longer than comic books and also usually have their storylines wrapped up in 1 or 2 books. Because the story does not have to be broken up over several issues, the stories tend to be more complex, and readers usually don't have to wait for the next issue to find out what is going to happen. So there you have it. A lot of people will sometimes use graphic novel as a catch-all term to describe all forms of collected comic books, myself included, but they are technically different. So for the purposes of this episode, I want to make it clear that we are not reading a graphic novel, but rather a collection of the first 6 issues.
So is that a trade?
That is a trade, correct. Yay!
Yay! I understand.
Good job,
Thank you.
Bella.
And this is why I was confused about what to read.
Yeah, a little peek behind the curtain. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but it is confusing because, like I said, if I say we're going to read the first volume of Saga, there are technically 3 separate book ones of Saga. There's issue number 1, the very first issue, which is about 22 pages, the first chapter of this ongoing story. There is volume 1 of Saga, which is the collection of the first 6 issues. And then there is the deluxe book 1, which is
Which I just
which is
learned
a
about
collection
today.
of the first 3 volumes, I think, of Saga.
Yeah,
You know,
because wasn't this one of the number 1 comics for a
Oh,
while?
yeah.
Or-
Yes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
This is
Like
a
it won
very popular
awards.
comic. Oh, award
Yeah.
Hugo Award-winning, Eisner, all sorts of other awards for art, for writing, for just ongoing series. It's really beloved. It's one of the reasons why we chose this book, because we wanted to do graphic novel. So we figured, why not choose one that is really popular, that people may have already read, and if they haven't read it, should read.
Yeah. And it's super easy to read the first volume, too. Like, you can read it in one sitting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I will point out that while this is not an After Dark episode, the comic book is for adults. I said that one of the comparisons that was used was a Game of Thrones. And if you watch a Game of Thrones, there is nudity and sex and violence galore. And this series has that as well. There is nudity, there is sex, there's violence, there is language. So it's not adult in the sense that it's X-rated, but it is mature. It's not for kids. So I just want to make sure that that is said in case you haven't read it and you're thinking, oh, I'll give this to my grandson. Well, make sure that that they are old enough to read this.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people still equate comic books with Superman and Spider-Man. They're for kids. That's not always the case.
Yeah.
Okay. I rambled on enough. Let's talk about the book itself. As always, let's go with our first impressions, no spoilers. Laura, why don't you tell me, what did you feel about this book?
Oh, I love it. Listeners who have been with us for a while know sci-fi is my genre. So I already love the entire premise. I do love that it still has some fantasy magic kind of aspects to it. But it's still very heavily sci-fi, space opera, war. There's some I don't know, I guess it's not really romance, but I mean, you mentioned it's like a Romeo and Juliet kind of thing. So I like the dynamic between the main characters. I love the narration. It's kind of a good mix of matter of fact with some wittiness, some sarcasm that I think really helps to keep you interested as you go through the story. I also really love the art. I think it's one of these rare books where the cover art almost exactly matches the inside art, which for people who aren't familiar with comic books, a lot of times they have a different artist for the cover, or the cover is a more refined style than what you see inside. So sometimes you can't really judge a comic book or a graphic novel by the cover because sometimes it's not the actual art style inside, but this one matches fairly well. And so it was nice being able to know what to expect in terms of what you're looking at. And some people might not think about the art, but if the art style doesn't match the story, it can be really hard to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I have read comic books that I struggled to get through because the style just did not match the story, the tone, or anything, and it took me so long to read it, and I felt really bad because it was a good art style, it just didn't fit. But this worked, so I really enjoyed it. And honestly, I think I will probably continue to read this. I know there's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah.
But like we just mentioned, it doesn't take long to get through these. So this could be like I only have a half an hour or an hour to read something. I can just pull this up or take the printout and read it. Just kind of like a pass the time kind of thing. I have more details. But I will wait until spoilers.
Okay. Okay. Vala, what about you? What do you think of this?
I really liked it. It definitely felt more fantasy than sci-fi, which was helpful for me. As I've mentioned, I'm not science. I feel like I have to say that every time we talk about sci-fi books. But no, I really liked it. I actually asked, I borrowed this from our previous host, Z LaFrance, and asked them for every other copy that they had so that I could continue reading. Because it's easy. I mean, it's a graphic novel, so you're having fun looking at the pictures. But there's considerably less text, so you can like sit down with these volumes for like an hour and read it, and then you can reread it and enjoy it a little bit differently every time. But you can also get through the story. But I will say I did make the mistake of looking up how many books or how many issues there are after. Well, based on Hoopla, I don't know if they've been collected into volumes or what, but I didn't like go digging that far. But there's like maybe somewhere between 60 and 80. I can't remember.
Yeah, issues, yeah.
Yeah, the number of issues. I was like, oh, I don't know that I'm gonna keep doing that. That's a big commitment for me. So I don't know how far I'm gonna get, but I do enjoy the artwork. I do enjoy the story. I agree with you, Laura. The one thing I noticed immediately was that the cover art was the same as the inside art, which is not often the case. So I was pleasantly surprised by that, and I also was surprised because I don't have as much experience with graphic novels. So, and one of the things that I've not enjoyed about them is that the story can have a very different tone from the artwork. And so I liked that these matched. So I had a lot of the same observations you did for non-spoiler first impressions, but overall was pleasantly surprised and like enjoyed it, and haven't really done a lot of graphic novels, but I can see why this one's really popular. I was sometimes surprised by like the choice of words, or like this is very 2012 at times, and I think we'll like go into that a little bit. It was just funny. It was like, wow, that was 12 years ago. That feels like 5 years ago, if that. My, how time, like just little things that were like times have changed, and that's crazy. Time is funny. But yeah, other than that, I overall really enjoyed it. So I can see why it won awards.
I love that you said that it felt more fantasy than sci-fi, and I said it felt more sci-fi than fantasy, and I feel like that just shows how well balanced this is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I was going to point that out. That's really funny. Again, one of the comparisons that's been used is Star Wars, and if you're a fan of Star Wars,
I was thinking about
like,
that.
Star Wars is a great blending of both, obviously. Like, it's in space, you have spaceships, and you have blasters, very sci-fi, but then you have Jedis moving things with their mind, and fantasy stuff, and dragons, and all that kind of stuff.
It just needs to be its own genre. Just needs to be its own genre.
They're different sides of the same coin. You know, they go hand in hand so well. I love when stories can bring them both together and balance them out, and they're not competing, and this really does it so nicely.
Yeah, because I mean, we've talked about how I'm not a sci-fi fan. I'm a Star Wars fan, which is very different.
Correct. You are.
Very different. Very different. And I didn't realize that really until we started reading books. And I was like, ooh, yeah, I don't really like sci-fi that much. It's more the fantasy elements that I enjoy, and I can handle like a sci-fi setting. And that's kind of how this felt, was like, yeah, there's sci-fi elements, but I was able to really focus more in on the fantasy aspect of it, which I enjoyed.
So, when I was making the episode graphics. So for this season, we have a different graphic for sci-fi book, one for fantasy. And when I was starting to work on it, I was like, wait, which template should I use for this one? Because I was like, it's both. Like, what do I do? I ended up going with the sci-fi template because I was like, this is happening in space and different planets and like aliens, different species and stuff. I was like, I'm just going to go with sci-fi.
Yeah.
But it's technically both.
Yeah. Another thing I want to add, Bella, you mentioned that you read that there's like 60 something issues, 60 to 80. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the author has said that he plans 108 issues.
Wow.
Yeah. It'll be going for a while. I think I've read the first 50 issues, I believe. No surprise that I love this series. It is one of my favorite comic book series. It is just a beautiful book, a beautiful story. The artwork, I love the artwork, but I love the story as well. Brian K. Vaughan is one of my favorite writers. I read some other stuff that he's done, and I love it all. This book is just so fun. It is witty, but also really intelligent. The book, now I'm just kind of talking about the series at large, not just the first 6 issues, but it's super diverse. There's a lot of ethnicities, there's a lot of diversity, gender roles, social commentary, depictions of war. It's a great series that I cannot recommend enough. And it was hard to stop at issue 6. Just for the show. I was like, I was done. I'm like, I'm ready to keep going, but I need to stop so I know exactly what we're talking about.
To be transparent, I have also already read this, but I'm pretty sure I've only read a few volumes. I don't even remember where I stopped. And it's been so long that I don't even really remember what happened. So this was still really fun reading it because all I remembered was I enjoyed it. And so I was like, cool, at least I know I'm gonna have a good time. Let's start.
Okay, so let's get into spoilers so we can really talk about this. As always, this is your warning. If you've not read this comic book series and you don't want things ruined for yourself, pause it here, go check it out. It'll be a quick read, then come back. If you don't care about that, if you've already read it, want to charge full strength ahead, here we go. All right, where do you want to... You know what? Let's start with favorite character because there's a lot of great characters in this. We mentioned it's kind of like Romeo and Juliet. We have Marco and Alana, who are our lovebirds, our couple. They are from warring factions. In this universe, we have a planet. I'm blanking on the names of the planet and the moon. And then there's a moon. And they're at war. They're both former soldiers who have left the war, have fallen in love, have a child, and are on the run. So we have Alana, we have Marco, we have baby Hazel. Mm-hmm. We have Prince Robot, who is...
Prince Robot the Fourth.
Correct, sorry, my bad. Prince Robot the Fourth, who is royalty, who is charged with finding them, because we can't have 2 soldiers in love, because that undermines the whole idea of war. We have a great collection of freelancers in this world. They're called freelancers that are basically like bounty hunters, mercenaries. And they have cool names like the Will or the Stock.
I think if I remember correctly, that is the actual naming convention for them. It's the something. So that's how people know that they're bounty hunters.
Yeah, it's like the calling card basically for them.
Which, I'm going to challenge us 3. What's our freelancer name? Think about it.
The Chaos.
Our own?
Or yeah, like if you're going to be a freelancer in this universe, what would be your name? The Chaos? Is that yours, Bella?
Huh?
Is that yours? The Chaos?
Yeah. Or the Unhinged.
The Unhinged.
Yeah.
I love it.
What would be yours, Rico?
I don't know. I got to think about it. I got to think about it a little bit.
You asked us, and
I said I think about it. I didn't expect to answer right away. You were quick with it.
Okay, we'll think about it.
Yeah.
But either way, I would love to know what our listeners think what our names should be.
Okay.
Maybe put it in our new Discord, y'all.
Yeah. Hey.
I feel like I want to mess with Bella and say yours would be the Science, because you're not.
Because I'm not science. Rude.
That's a good idea.
Anyhow,
That's a
back
good
to the
idea.
question at hand. Favorite character or favorite characters? Who stood out?
What's the babysitter's name?
Isabel?
Isabel. I kind of like her, honestly.
Isabel's
Me
great.
too. That was my number one, and then the Will would have to be my second choice, just because he kind of he's interesting. He's not like a typical bounty hunter. Like he's on the rebound. He's gonna try to save a child slave. It's interesting. It's interesting. I'm invested in his story.
Yeah, what I like about the Will is like all great morally ambiguous characters. Like they're not good people, but they have a code, right? And you need to just understand their own logic. And if you can follow the code, I can get behind you. And there's a great scene in this book, in one of the books. I forget which issue, but the Will goes to this pleasure planet essentially, and the guy operating is like, "Here, I have something special for you," and it's a child sex worker. And the Will immediately is like, "No, fuck this shit. Like, absolutely not. I can't believe you're doing this." And the guy who's working there is like, "You murder children. What's the difference between sleeping with them?" And the Will's like, "If you don't know the difference, then you're already too far gone." And I thought that was just a great fucking line of, there is a major difference.
They're
for
still
this
both
character.
really bad, but there's
for sure there
is
yeah,
a difference.
but there is a difference, you know, like, and he has that code, and so I can get behind this guy who is otherwise perhaps not a great character.
I love how he handled that dude. He literally just crushed the dude's skull between his hands, like just like clapped his hands together, crushed the guy's head.
Yeah. Like I didn't really like him until, like, I didn't have an opinion on him. Like I was kind of indifferent to his character
Yeah, we're like,
until
whatever.
that moment. And then I was like, okay, I'm invested to learn where this takes us, like what your character development is, because obviously there's more to you than just being a mercenary. But like, what's your story? I don't know. So it hooked me in pretty quickly.
I think my two favorite characters, they're all great. My favorite
They're all
character
very good.
design is like Prince Robot and the robots.
So weird.
Their species.
It's so weird.
For those of you who maybe haven't read it, they're just picture people, humanoid people, but they have TVs or like kind of old school computer monitors as their head.
Yeah, I was thinking it reminds me of the old school Mac
60s
monitors.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like 60s, like those stylized TVs that would be like circular with like wire frames around and like really cool. So I enjoyed the design, but the idea, the concept of TVs for your head,
Yeah.
you know, that's where I'm like, I'm not science. How the fuck does that work?
And that's where it's
just
fantasy.
weird.
You know? This you just
Is
accept it
it?
and move on.
And it's funny because like sometimes it's blank, sometimes it's static, sometimes he's actually communicating visually with his face, which is the monitor.
Yeah, visually.
But he can
I think-
see, they can see through it and everything.
Yeah, and that's the confusing part, is like when they're just talking and there's nothing there, and then like something flashes on the screen and they're like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine." And I was like, I don't understand what that means yet. What? 'Cause what is
I also like that it has an antenna, like little bunny ear antennas.
Again, what are those? Are those his ears? Like
it's like a little
TVs
cowlick.
don't hear.
It's how he sees and hears. I don't know.
Sure.
Just accept
Again.
it, Bella. Don't question. Just
Again, I'm not science, but when you bring science into fantasy, that's where I get very confused, because I'm like, I know enough to know that that's not how it works. But I also love fantasy. Magic doesn't make sense necessarily.
you make it so difficult for yourself. There's no
Yeah, I
there's
really
no
do.
trying
I
to
try to-
understand this. There's
I
no
try
like
to
what
think
is the
it through
science
too much.
behind a TV as a head? You just accept it.
Well, then don't call it science fiction. I don't know. Don't bring science into it from the beginning, and then I won't think about it. And then I just confused myself as we've explored in previous episodes. So,
Oh gosh.
Jason, what was the other character you were thinking?
I think well, my two actual favorite characters are Alana, the main female protagonist. I think she's great. She is quick to draw a weapon. She's snarky. She's just a fun character. But also Lying Cat, who is the Will's sidekick.
You hate cats.
No, I love cats. I'm just allergic to them.
Oh, okay.
No, I genuinely love cats. I just can't be around them. No, but Lying Cat is great. They're feline, and they have the ability to tell when somebody is lying.
And it says lying.
They say lying. So if someone were to,
Lying.
yeah. So if when Bella says that they aren't science, they'd be quiet. If Bella said, "I love science fiction," the cat would be lying.
Lying. It's a bullshit radar.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
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 It's great.
Comes in handy.
It's a lie detector. Yeah, it does. I wish my cat would actually do that.
I was actually going to mention, I think Alana's maybe one of my favorites too. Not just in general, I generally love the female badass characters, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that Alana is this badass character, but is also very loving and caring and shows a more feminine side as well. And having a child and showing that she loves her partner. And it's very interesting because a lot of times we don't necessarily see the badass character being like that.
Yeah.
Kind of, you get what I mean?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what's really interesting at the core of this novel is that there's a war being waged between these two planets, but it's gone on for so long that the war has been outsourced to other planets to be waged away from their worlds so they have peace. So these is my understanding. That's
yes and
my
no
understanding.
But it's also because they realize that their planet and their moon can't continue to war each other because their worlds depend on each other's existence.
Okay, so I don't know. It's so timely to what's happening right now in our world and like Palestine and Israel, and that primarily like the US is funding a lot of the violence, the weapons, etc., the government that's conducting this war. And it just, to me, it was like, even though this was 2012, this is still so relevant today. This theme of who wages war and who suffers the consequences. So like Isabel, the babysitter, is she's a casualty of this war. She's like, I fell on a landmine. I don't know whose it was. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, that's a tale as old as time in our modern era of war. But even I'm sure as far back as it goes, right? Like women were taken as slaves, children were taken as slaves. It didn't matter who you were. It just like you were on the wrong side of this war when your enemy captured you. So like, I don't know. I came out of it just being like, this is so timely right now. And it makes me sad that this is still timely and this is still a relevant story in this modern age where we have people are living longer, people are making more money than ever, corporations are basically people, but actual people are still dying out there for arguably issues that should not be happening. Like people should be able to live in their homes and not be moved and then slaughtered for moving and all this good stuff. And so like the children, Isabel and like the other children who've died from war become, what did they call them? Was it the terrors? What was their name? The outsiders call them the horrors. The horrors. Thank you. So the outsiders call them the horrors, but it's actually the children who've died as a result of this conflict who are trying to protect the planet. And I just was like, oh God, like even further that the future generations are paying for like the sins and the war of their ancestors. And they are the ones trying to stop it from continuing, even from beyond the grave. Like I just thought that was really beautiful. I don't know. I had so many thoughts about this. I want to read it again and keep reading because it was like really resonating with me, but I'm
Yeah.
just curious like what you guys picked up on in this,
Yeah.
like the heart of the story. Like, what is the message? Like, it's beautiful,
Yeah.
it's well written, the characters are well developed. I'm excited to see where they go, but like at the core of it, this feels like an anti-war story.
Absolutely.
And it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
want to know
Well,
you guys.
well, you said that, it's still relevant today, even though it was written in 2012. And the sad truth of it is, no matter when you read this, it'll probably always be relevant because we as
Yeah.
humans don't ever fucking learn. We're always going to be at war. Somebody's going to be at war with somebody for some stupid ass reason. I pulled a quote that I really liked. It's Marco, the main male character. He's taken a vow of pacifism. Like he used to be a soldier. He doesn't want to fight anymore. And there's a quote that he says. It says, "Violence is stupid. Even as a last resort, it only ever begets more of the same," which is very true. It was like, are any wars or any reason for war justified? Perhaps. I don't know. Take someone smarter than me to really determine that. But once you start a war, it doesn't just end. It never ever ends.
Yeah.
Like, there's always lasting effects, and it bleeds into other things. And sure, okay, World War II ended, but there's still things that came out of that are still going today. And they're going to start World War III at some point. And like you said, Bella, it's like the people who are starting these wars, the people who are funding these wars,
Are not
usually
fighting
then
them.
they're not fighting them. And that's what the book was saying is like the main
yeah,
planet
that's-
and the moon, they are not at war anymore. It's all these other planets who are fighting them like by proxy. Like that's where the war is being waged.
And they're like, oh, and it looks really peaceful on the planets now. Like everything's harmonious again because we've outsourced the war. And I just was like, fucking hell, if this is not a commentary on like the industrialized complex of war and how the US has used its influence and power and other developed worlds, but just like I live in America, so I'm going to focus on them. How we use our money and influence to wage war in other places for our own benefit without actually reaping the consequences directly. There are indirect consequences like inflation, the housing market, the job market, corporations overall profit margins and all that bullshit, right? But at the end of the day, I don't have to worry about what's happening in my day-to-day life.
Correct.
I'm walking down the street and I get to go to Target. I get to go have drinks with friends. When somewhere in the world there are children dying with an American flag on the missile that fell on their house. And that's just like it's fucked up.
Yeah.
But this is something that we can all relate to. And it's still fucked up that this was 12 years ago and that's continued to be the story.
Yeah.
Even in this developed world as we've gotten more and more wealthy, healthier. That's not the case for everybody. Just really fucking sucks. So I just was like mad reading this book
Yeah.
I was like, that's how powerful this author is I'm still mad at a story written 12 years ago.
Yeah. Earlier I mentioned that the author is one of my favorites. Years ago, I'm trying to pull it up, see if I can find it really quick. He wrote a short graphic novel called The Pride of Baghdad. It's a fictionalized account of the true story of 4 lions that escaped from the Baghdad Zoo after the American bombing in 2003. And it just kind of follows them as they're, trying to survive in this post-war setting. This author clearly has things to say about war. And he says them in such a moving way. Pride of Baghdad, it's a short graphic novel. I think it's under 200 pages. It's one of my favorite graphic novels. It is beautiful. And it also just highlights the victims of war. These are just lions. And they were in the zoo, and the zoo got bombed, and now they're like, well, our reality's changed. Now we just got to survive out on these streets. And it's beautiful, and it is moving, and it's told in a very simple way. And I think he carries that kind of storytelling and those themes into this saga of war affects everybody, and there's all these victims. These horrors you mentioned, like you said, they're kids. I don't think we mentioned, if you haven't read it, they, like you said, they are victims of the war casualties. They're ghosts now. They're the ghosts of these children that died, but they're still around because of, you know, fantasy stuff, magic.
And there is a point where Isabel says, like, even though I didn't start this war, even though I'm long dead, I'm hopeful that it'll eventually end.
Yeah.
Something like that. I also think that Pride of Baghdad, first of all, that sounds incredible. And I will be adding that to my TBR. But second of all, I also think that author and even Brian Vaughan for Saga, talking about how it's easier for people to get upset about, like, with the will. It's easier for people to be upset about things that we deem inherently vulnerable, like children, animals, facing like pain and suffering, but war dehumanizes death. So like if the lions had died, it would have been sad, but maybe we would have moved on. The children, the will kills kids, but like raping them is not okay. And there's something about, like, as we like experience war, we become desensitized to death.
Yeah, I mean, out of sight, out of mind. That's what death is, right?
Yeah, object
someone
permanence.
dies,
they're no longer
exactly.
here. And I'm like, oh God, like this is such a deep and thoughtful story. Like everything about it is intentional. So those were some of the things that, like, I caught on to that resonated with me.
Which I gotta say, it's really funny that we're talking about these serious themes, which is there and it's important, and this is very serious stuff to talk about. But the author jokingly described this book as Star Wars for perverts as well. So it can be both, you know. Things can be serious.
Shift the tone, Rico. But yes, there's a scene where the Will is shirtless eating cereal and gets a call from his ex-girlfriend that's like, don't be such a pussy. You're a bounty hunter. Like, let's just go kill some people and make some money.
Yeah.
I just was like, oh, okay. So like at the same time that we're having these like deep, thoughtful reflections on war and the effects on children and the future implications, like who would bring a baby into this, that then this guy is like, fuck it. If my ex-girlfriend is the other bounty hunter, I don't want any part of this. I'm going to take my unlimited expense card and go fuck some sex workers.
Yep.
Unlimited on my employer's dime. And then the sex workers are just heads and legs. And I just was like, that's killing me.
They were just introducing you to the planet.
It was incredible. But I just was like, that. Yes, they were the ones but it was sort of like, it was such a setting of expectations that like you are here for orifices to put something in. You know, that's what you're here for. I just was like, I was dying. I was like, this author contains multitude.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I can be like, on one hand, upset about children dying on landmines because like Isabel as a ghost is like just half a body. And then I don't know if like the parallels of the sex workers also not being full bodies is like kind of messing with my head too, where I'm like, ooh, let's talk about the consequences of war being reduced to like a male gaze. Anyways, it's crazy. I was like, there's so much imagery and symbolism in this graphic novel. Like, we could talk about it all day.
Laura,
Related to that, something that I kept thinking about while I was reading this, I kind of fell off of reading comics after I had to close my own comic shop.
We need like a sad violin playing in the background for you, Laura. It's still sad. Like someone was like, we need a place where we could go like shop for books and also have coffee and like comics. And I was like, there was a place.
I tried.
We had it.
COVID Thank you,
2020. Yeah.
No, but so reading this was reminding me like the differences between reading a comic book and reading a written, like a novel. Because there are things in this comic book that nobody is going to get away with putting in a novel. the wording choice, as you mentioned earlier, Bella,
Yeah, we haven't
the
talked about
way
that.
people look, the things that they're doing. Nobody's gonna get away with doing this in an actual novel. And it's interesting that comic book creators can get away with so much in here that made me really uncomfortable. And I was like, it's like, maybe it's just me, but I was like, no, I've read comic books that use the same kind of language or have the same kind of questionable scenes or whatever. And I'm like, I think it's just comics get away with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just thought it was interesting thinking about that.
Yeah,
Because the difference in people who read comics and people who read novels is they're so drastically different.
Yeah, I was going to say at time, because I'm definitely a novel reader. And so some of the like the language or like the words they use to describe people, I was like, oh, I was like, this is a comic. It feels like adult cartoons, think of like Family Guy, Has Been Hotel. Those are hard for me to get through, as funny as they are, because you see animation and you think kids show, or at least I do.
Yeah.
I know that's my experience. And then they're like, fuckity fuck, fuck, fuck. And you're like, God, it's so jarring. And so to see like beautiful illustrations, and then they're like, don't be such a fucking pussy and just go kill some babies. And you're like, okay. I gotta remember I'm reading a graphic novel for adults. It has adult themes. It might be beautifully illustrated, but it is telling a certain story. And I just have to remember that. Especially when they have these like beautiful moments and then you switch to like the will and you're like, okay. Yeah. Cool.
Reading a comic book graphic novel is such a visceral experience, because like if we were to read a novelization of the story, right, we might get to a description where you like, oh, we see two people with TVs for heads having sex, and you might quickly just read that and move on. It's like, well, okay, it's there. I don't need to picture that. A comic book is going to make you see it. Yeah. We're going to turn the page and see two naked gray people with TVs for heads fucking doggy style.
That was
like,
so
we're not going to
jarring.
let you not see this. And I'm like, well, that's a thing I saw now. Fantastic. It
would be so hard to picture these things. Like, how do you describe like when the Will arrives on the pleasure planet and it's these two women with only heads and legs wearing stockings or whatever? Like, how are you going to picture that in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Truly, words could not do it justice. And I think, again, the art style, Laura, to your point, really like captures some of the different tones in the scenes. So like when it's moodier, we've got darker colors. When they're supposed to be caricatures commenting on something, like the sex workers, it's like, oh, okay, like they're commenting that like this planet, people are just here to fuck. So give them a face, give them some legs. Those are the greeters. Sets the tone. And they're kind of like, they've got big lips. They've got like literally nothing between the head and the legs, because that's what you're here for. So, and that's the art style, and it's beautiful. And it's like very complimentary of the message that they're trying to send.
Yeah, for anybody who has not read this, like I need to paint the picture for you. These greeters,
you gotta
like
read it.
It's like if you took a Funko head, like a Funko Pop head, and shoved two like Barbie legs underneath it.
Yep.
Like that's essentially what they were. Just like a big head and two long legs. And it's like, okay.
Done in like the style of Miyazaki, like.
Oh,
character.
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good way to put
That's immediately what I thought of, was like, okay, this is like the Spirited Away. I mean, Miyazaki in general, but like that's the one I'm more familiar with. Yeah. And like the bigger nose, like the kind of exaggerated features, because they're trying to make it grotesque.
Yeah.
And so it was more grotesque of a character drawing in that scene, because I think it's like this is the sex planet. That's what you're here for. Like, we're gonna put it in your face. Sex, 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 sex. I was like, that's good advertising. There you go. Know what you're in for.
Yeah.
So,
I fucking love comic books so much. They're so They're so
It's
much
fun.
fun to read, and they're so different. Like Laura, you said, the artwork has to match the story, and just as there are endless stories out in the world, there are endless ways you can draw a comic book and tell a story with illustrations. Some rely heavy on narration and dialogue. Some are almost just pure artwork. It's a special relationship that the reader has with a comic book. And you sit there and you take it in, and like again, you're forced to see certain things that maybe you didn't want to see, but that's the joy of a comic book. It's gonna make you know exactly what it's talking about.
Yep. Perfect. Well put.
Was anybody upset about the stock?
Yes,
Upset?
that she died.
Oh, I wasn't
Like,
invested.
there was so much potential with her character.
Oh.
Like I
She
said,
gave me like spider vibes, and I said, I don't like spiders, so kill her.
she's a great
her.
character design. Such a great character design.
Yeah.
Creepy,
creepy,
but
I
also
didn't like it.
sexy. And I'm kind of into it, and I don't know what that says
Okay,
about
tentacle
me.
boy. Okay, tentacle boy.
You know,
I'm
No,
not
like,
even surprised.
I could see this character design being a character in one of our After Dark books.
oh yeah.
There's got to be one
Yeah.
out there somewhere.
Like I can see how
Rico's
the
writing
Wilks.
it right now. Rico's writing that book.
Yeah.
But like, she's so creepy and fucking badass, and I was like, oh, I'm excited to see what she does. No.
I mentioned I've read I think up to like issue 50. I did not remember that she died. I thought she was a bigger character because in my mind, like that image just like lives in my mind rent free.
She had an impression on you.
She did, and I thought she was a bigger character to the series, and so I was truly surprised when she died.
Yeah.
I was like, oh fuck, she dies. I don't remember that.
I thought
Yeah,
she
Did
was
she come
at least
back later?
at
I don't remember. I truly don't know.
Yeah, I thought she had at least a little bit more to go. No.
Yeah. It's giving me like Darth Maul vibes again when I was a kid. Like all the advertising for episode 1 was Darth Maul everything. It's like, yo, this is the dopest looking fucking character. Like this guy's dope, and then he comes out with his double-bladed lightsaber. And as me, I think I was like 13 or something. It was like, this is fucking amazing. He's so fucking cool. And then he dies, and I'm like, what the fuck? You can't just give me a dope character design like that and take him away. Same thing with the stock. She comes out, she's fucking 8 hands blasting people, and nope, she's gone. Like, oh okay.
At least
it
we
also-
got Darth Maul later.
Yeah.
At least
That's
we got
true.
Darth Maul later.
Again, talking about science fiction, I'm still mad about that. How the fuck did he survive? And that's
We can
another
go into
episode.
that later.
Oh.
Yes, we can. But speaking of Star Wars characters that the stock reminded me of was Asajj Ventress.
Yeah.
I could see that.
And I was thinking about how because you were thinking about Darth Maul, and I was like Asajj Ventress for sure. But Asajj Ventress also, like, you only see her in the Clone Wars cartoons. Like, she's not in any of the main movies. And that's kind of how I felt about the stock. I was like, oh, like she was only in like the first 6 issues. Kind of a waste of a good character. Like, she could have been more interesting. But she also was creepy as hell with spider legs. So I said, good riddance. I didn't like looking at her. But I think
Spider
that
legs
was
with hands at the end of them.
yeah, it was
Just
I didn't
weird.
like it.
She's
And
legit.
she has no arms.
She's
just
a
torso.
legit spider.
Yeah, again, like Miyazaki vibes on like the hybrid character creepiness,
Yeah.
which is I'm not a Miyazaki fan for that reason a lot of the time. I do like Miyazaki films; they're beautiful, but the characters sometimes can be really creepy. They sit in my brain, they bury in there, and I don't like it. I don't want to think about it. I think that's also why I have a hard time with graphic novels, as you mentioned. Like the artwork has to be experienced. Like, you can't not picture what they want you to picture. You have to see it. They make you look at it and sit with it. And I'm like, I didn't want to. I didn't want to. So
Sorry, Bella.
it's okay. No, I mean, I enjoyed it. It just, that's why I've had a hard time getting into certain graphic novels, is I'm like, oh, that was gross. I don't want to see them doing doggy style. I don't want to picture TVs having sex. Ugh. But I had to see it. Couldn't get away from it. But Rico enjoyed it. And you enjoyed it, Laura. So that's good. America's face. He's like, where do I take this?
I wanna quickly point out one of my favorite parts of the book. The main story is we have Alana and Marco. They have a new baby, Hazel, and they're on the run from the government and these freelancers that are all hunting them because we can't have two dissenters of this war together. Absolutely not. And so it's them trying to escape this planet and just trying to find peace somewhere. They get a map. They get a hold of a map, and on the map they have what was it called? A spaceship forest. And they're trying to get to the spaceship forest because this planet grows spaceships. These spaceships are like essentially trees made out of wood, but they're living entities. Like you can't just get on one and fly out. Cool. You have to give up something to prove that you're worthy. And then once you're on the spaceship doesn't take you where you want to go. It just goes where it wants. It'll take suggestions if you could convince it. But that's such a cool idea.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Oh man,
I forgot about that. And so reading it, I was like, wait, is this a real forest? Is this gonna have a real spaceship? And then it showed it, and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool.
Such a cool design, yeah. And this is where I get a little like you, Bella, where I start questioning the science a little bit. He's like, okay, here's a spaceship out of wood. If it's leaving and entering atmospheres, shouldn't the heat cause it to burst in flames or cause it? You know what? Never mind. I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to go with it.
It's because magic was involved. I didn't think about it.
Oh, you're so weird.
It is so weird. As soon as it's magic, I'm like, cool.
You just have to accept that a lot of the stuff just pretend it's magic. But
the TV thing doesn't make any sense.
Just pretend that they are TV heads because of magic.
If they were androids, that would be different. Like
maybe they are.
Replace their head. That's not what it seems like. Though.
We don't know that yet.
Oh my god. Well, anyways. Also, then are the people on the TVs also TV heads, or are they regular humanoids? Like in the shows that he keeps like popping up and on. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Let's not talk about it more. I could talk about it all day.
Okay.
I'm confused. Yeah. I mean, that's all I wanted to. I overall loved the book. We'll keep reading. Anyone have anything else they want to bring up?
I just wanted to mention, and I don't know if the details I remember are correct. Apparently, people were complaining about the breastfeeding in this book.
Uh-huh.
And so I heard that the author decided to make that the cover of the book 1 collection.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
So if you look it up, it is literally a close-up of the baby on the boob.
Oh, well. Good
and I was like, that's great. Good for him.
I love that. Fuck misogyny.
Good for you.
I think it's great. I mean, this so far, again, I don't remember after volume 1, but so far it's very much about this baby. It's taking care of this baby, and this baby, they're trying to have it survive and stuff. And so I was like, this makes sense.
Yeah, it is the baby story, because there's narration throughout that comes from Hazel in the future. And she's kind of telling you, like, this is my story of how I came to be. This is where I grew up. These are my parents. And so it's kind of, I never watched the show.
Hazel survives.
Yeah. I never watched the show, but it's like How I Met Your Mother kind of thing. It was like, I am telling the story of my life before we get to this point. And so I am curious to see how it all wraps up. I'm curious to see how we get there. I do want to continue on with the series. I want him to wrap up the 108 issues. I'm going to read them all. I'll probably wait until they're all out, and I'll probably just marathon all of it. And
that's kind of what I was thinking. I'd rather just sit with them all at once, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's good. It's a really good book, and we're not the only ones that think so, because on Goodreads, as a rating of 4.17 out of over 334,000 ratings, a lot of people have read this, and a lot of people love it. It's a really, really good book. I think we're on agreement that we would recommend this book to people. Whether you like sci-fi like Laura, whether you like fantasy like Bella, if you like star-crossed lovers, if you like Game of Thrones, violence and sex, if you like fun Star Wars-esque adventures, this book has everything we mentioned. It has some deep commentary on war and victims, and this is a really, really good book. I really can't recommend it enough.
I agree.
Okay, so let's rate this ourselves. What are we giving this book? Laura, what would you rate Saga Volume 1?
I'm going to give it a 4.5. I'll probably round up to 5 on Goodreads.
Goodreads, okay.
I'm doing the half because, like I mentioned earlier, there were some word choices that made me a little uncomfortable. And I don't necessarily think that's just because of the time that it was written in. I think that a lot of people also still write this way now.
Yes.
And so it just made me a little uncomfortable. But the story overall, the art, the characters, everything else, I love. Again, highly recommend this book to people.
I would copy and paste what you said, Laura, but I would say 4.5 to 4 stars, because I think just for me, I'm not like a big graphic novel person. And then also the language choice, I'm like, I don't think that was just a sign of the times. I think that's like truly like a personal style choice. And that's just like not a style I enjoy or would choose, but it was not as frequent enough in the graphic novel to have taken me out of enjoying it either. I just think like I would caveat my recommendation to somebody to like, there's some like crass language that I like don't enjoy, but overall, like I think it's well written, and beautifully illustrated. So like solid 4.5 stars.
Okay.
Jason?
I think I've given it 5 in the past and would continue to give it 5 stars. I enjoy everything about this book. Yeah, what you're saying about some of the word choices exists, and I do remember reading this again for the second or third time, whatever. Calling those out, I'm like, oh, I forgot this word was in here. But it, like Belle, like you said, it's not enough that it raised any sort of red flags for me. My go-to example is somebody who sometimes uses some very choice words or choice depictions of things is Stephen King. Like, Stephen King can write, man. That guy is a great writer. Like, I get sucked into his stories. But he'll refer to certain people a certain way. And it takes me out of the story because it's not just like a one-time thing. It is an ongoing thing where it's like, it's jarring to me.
You're like, racism.
Yeah, and he does it on purpose, like because he's like, oh, here's a guy from the South who is a racist. How can I show that they're racist? But also, I'm like, there's other ways to show someone's a racist other than just going straight to certain terms. So I think like in this book, the terms that were used, I felt like, how do I put it? Like, I guess it made sense for the character and what they're trying to do. Do I think that there's always a better word choice to get the same point across? Yes. But if it happens once, twice, I'm not gonna like knock it, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
So for me, it is a 5-star book. I think the writing is great. It flows nicely. It's so easy to read. It's layered, it's complex, but it's also simple. The artwork is gorgeous. It's not too overdone. It's not too rough. It's somewhere nice in the middle that works for the story. So it's a 5-star book for me.
Cool.
Nice.
All right, let's start wrapping this up and talk about some of the things we're reading next. Laura, what are you reading next?
Wow.
Okay, so before we start recording, you were like, Laura, I don't know if this is intentional, but you didn't write anything on the outline for this. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. I'll figure it out.
Have you figured it out?
And so I went through my TBR and decided which ones I really want to read. And I put them also on hold on Libby. So then I just kind of read what's available next.
Okay.
So I thought it was going to be Saint's last book.
An Education in Malice?
Education and Malice. I thought it was going to be that because Libby said it was going to be available next. But then while we were recording, I got a notification that Snow Crash is available. So I'll be reading Snow Crash next.
All right, there we go. Game time decision for Laura over here.
Nice.
Okay.
I love when Libby chooses. Yeah, I'm just reading more Percy Jackson. So the next one, which is The Last Olympian. I don't know what it is. It's a 50-50 shot what it's called, but I'm still reading Chalice of the Gods. I'll probably finish that honestly today or tomorrow.
Wait, The Last Olymp.
No, I know. It's not that. Rico.
Trials of Apollo?
No, that I am going to read that one though, because
there's Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and then there's Heroes of Olympus, which is a sequel series to that. And then
it's just Chalice of the Gods and then The Wrath of the Triple Goddess, which is coming. Oh, I thought there was another one. My bad. So I'll probably read Trials of Apollo and then probably take a break till Wrath of the Triple Goddess comes out, or try to get it on NetGalley or something, because that's not out till September. So yeah.
Gotcha.
What about you, Rico? What are you reading?
The book I am reading right now is called The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. I mentioned my work book club. This is the book that we selected for this next meeting. Shout out to the Finer Things Club. That's what we call ourselves. It's a cozy and charming novel full of mystery and secrets. It was chosen by my coworker Tiffany. So hello, Tiffany. And yeah, I'm about 40% of the way in, and it's fine. So far, it's cozy, like you said. It's multiple POVs, multiple timelines. Sometimes I struggle with that. Sometimes I care more about one and don't care about the others. And the jumping around can be tricky sometimes. But they're all kind of interconnected. Is it just a mystery? It's like maybe magical realism. There isn't really anything yet that is fantastical or magical, but I wouldn't be surprised if it went that way, because it's about this lost bookshop that maybe existed and people are trying to find the current day but isn't where it's supposed to be. And so we kind of see the story of how we're reading the story of how it was opened and now people trying to find it. So it could end up being just historical fiction, mystery. It could maybe be magical realism, yet to be determined.
It kind of, your description makes me think of The Lost Apothecary.
That was one of the books that it compared itself to. Okay. Yeah. Which,
I think I get what you're saying then.
Yeah.
With the back
previous
and forth
episode,
with the timelines.
Yeah, that we kind of struggled with, and same thing. But yeah, it's cute overall. It is cute. It is cozy. I think it's just I want more from it. But like I said, I'm only 40% of the way in. It could wrap itself up really nicely by the end. So we'll see.
Cool.
All right. So that's the end of our episode. Thank you so much for listening to us talk about Saga Volume 1 by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. As always, if you have read this comic book and want to share your thoughts, please do so. You can find us on social media at Shit We've Read. Also, again, we have a Discord server that you can join. Link will be in the episode description, or find us on social or our website. You're welcome to talk to us there about this book or any of the other books that we've ever talked about, or just share a book that you really enjoy, and we'll jump into that conversation with you. Our next episode, which is releasing the week after this episode, is our author interview with St. Gibson to discuss her highly anticipated upcoming novel, Evocation, which is a story filled with fortune-telling, tarot cards, intrigue, and unexpected romance. I know we're super excited to talk to her about this book. We have previously discussed one of her books, like Laura mentioned earlier, A Dowry of Blood, which is a retelling of Dracula's Brides. That episode, featuring guest host Emma Skies, is available for you to listen to now, and I highly recommend that you do. We are very excited to be back with Season 4. We have some great books and discussions heading your way in the future, and are also currently in the middle of planning some fun and exciting surprises that will hopefully be able
giveaways.
Yep, some giveaways that we'll be announcing very soon. So keep an eye out on our Instagram and Discord for details. All that to say that if you enjoy what we do, we have more of it coming your way. And, if you do enjoy what we do, why don't you go ahead and give us a like and a follow on whichever podcatcher app you listen to us. It really does help us out, and we'd love you forever. As always, thank you so much for listening. Bella, Laura, thanks for chatting with me as always.
Of course.
Anytime.
I will catch you all next time. And that's it. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Shit We've Read is hosted by Laura Benson, Jason Rico, and Bello Romero, with music by Joshua Chilton and editing by Jason Rico.
To join the discussion on this and all other books we've read, find us at Shit We've Read on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok.
For more information about us or to request transcripts, please visit shitwe'veread.com.
This podcast is part of the Bilo Network. Visit bilonetwork.com for more great geeky podcasts.
Thanks so much for listening.